My name is Chris Ying. I'm the editor-in-chief of Lucky Peach magazine. Welcome to your own campus. Another Authors at Google event. This time with Chef Thomas McNaughton of Flour and Water, Slu Maria, and Central Kitchen in San Francisco. Three wildly successful places that I imagine many of you have visited. Yummy. You got a yummy back there. And we're here to kind of talk and celebrate your new cookbook, Flour and Water Pasta. Let's just jump right in, unless you want me to say more nice things.
No, please, that's perfect.
So the first thing I found interesting about this book was that the very first voices we hear from are not yours, they're from your two business partners,
right.
Kind of giving the background of how Flour and Water came to be and their sort of somewhat circuitous path to being restaurateurs. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision and that story?
I think that one of the book is really in three parts, and the idea behind those three parts were, the first one is that it had to be a story of behind the scenes. And I think in this day and age, with reality TV and everyone wants to see what goes on behind the scenes, and we really wanted to kind of tell the story of how the restaurant Flour and Water came to fruition. And that really started with my two business partners, David White and David Steele. And the author, Paolo Lucchese, he wanted to have some sort of rhythm to it. And so if you open the book right off the bat, it has rhythm and it's supposed to kind of draw you in a little bit. And I thought it was great, kind of just slightly different typeface. And it kind of hops back and forth, their story and how it kind of intertwines. And one starts in Ireland, one starts in, South Jersey, and how, how my two partners met at that time. So.
It's sort of like a classic tale in restaurants of the chef and his business partners never seeing eye to eye on things, but it seems, based on the story you tell here, that you guys have a very different relationship. And that
I think that a restaurant's a crazy business venture. It's a crazy experience every single day, and we are three people that we approach a restaurant in three completely different ways, and I think that we value each other's experience. It's very much, kind of jumping ahead, but it's how the restaurants run on a daily basis, that it's a complete collaborative nature. And really every single decision along the way funnels down to the three of us, and there's a veto power. You need two votes out of three to pass the law that is being passed that day. And that collaborative nature and that kind of trust that we have in each other, I think, is certainly unique. It doesn't mean that, the meeting may start with us arguing for 45 minutes, prior to it. But we each approach something different. We bring different perspectives. Outside perspective from outside of our industry is really, really important to us. It's staying away from the humdrum nature of this is how it's done in a restaurant, and this is how it's done in a professional kitchen. And so we value that collaborative nature of being able to sit around a round table and talk about something, and then, like I said, arguing for 45 minutes, and then we come up with a solution.
And the way that you first got this job was pretty unorthodox too. Can you tell us about where you were and how that happened?
Yeah, I was traveling a lot in Europe, and they call it staging. So staging at a restaurant means that you can go there and you can work for free. It's like working for a blacksmith. You can watch them work and you can get hands-on experience, and there's an intellectual property that goes on with cooking and professional restaurants. There's also a physical, it's a craft. You have to use your hands. The more that you use your hands, you're training them. And so that was always incredibly important to me. And I was in Bologna working at a pasta laboratorio at the time, and I just had to go back to San Francisco. The honest story is my girlfriend was here at the time, and I really wanted to move back to San Francisco, and working at these amazing restaurants and on some farms, I saw a random Craigslist ad for a chef for a restaurant, and I just emailed back. It was like 2 sentences. It was like, I don't have a resume. I worked at Gary Danko's, La Folie, and Quince. I'm coming back to Marin, and I really want to goat farm. And that was it. And it was like 2 sentences long, and I think I even capitalized, I really want to goat farm. And then my now business partner, David White, emailed me back, because we previously worked together at Quince, and he's like, Tom, is that you? Like, what the hell are you talking about? You want a goat farm? we just started to kind of evolve the conversation. It was perfect timing. I was in Bologna, which is the heart of Emilia-Romagna in Italy. Is really the heart of what most Americans think of as Italian food. It's prosciutto di Parma, tagliatelle Bolognese, lasagna, fresh rolled egg doughs, Parmesan Reggiano, balsamic vinegar, and he was talking about opening this incredibly rustic Italian restaurant, and it was focused on pizza. I thought that Flour and Water was the worst name ever possibly made up for a restaurant. I'm still dealing with it right now. Nobody ever forgets it though, which is a great thing. And it was just perfect timing. It was being in Emilia-Romagna. My majority of my restaurant background was from more fine dining restaurants, and I just fell in love with that, the rustic nature of the food, but also the culture of how Italians eat and their philosophy on food. And really wanted to come back to San Francisco. There's so much in line with the values in San Francisco dealing with food as well that it was just kind of really, really good timing. But I refused the partnership, and I wasn't going to be a partner, and I was just going to act like a consulting chef. And then after the first couple of months, it just, so much of blood, sweat, and tears went into producing Flour and Water that the partnership just kind of seemed natural.
And do you have a goat farm now, or?
We do not have a goat farm. We're so close. We're so close to a
So
goat
you're
farm. Yeah.
a bit of a failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Achieving that dream.
I just keep getting back up.
No, but so that trip you took to Italy, you had been cooking in very high quality restaurants in San Francisco and the Bay Area, and then you made this sort of decision to go to Italy and do something a little bit less refined to get in touch with something else.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, that was the same. You were making the same journey that Alice Waters or Jeremiah Tower had done 30 or 40 years before you, and they had that same epiphany that changed the way they cook. So what was it that you encountered in these places in Bologna and Emilia-Romagna that struck a chord with you?
I think that just kind of traveling the whole time, if you, growing up and having a completely ADD nature as a kid, wanted to try a little bit of everything. And I first fell in love with kitchens because it just coincided with my personality. So you're never a master chef. You're never going to master cooking and food. And that's what really led me to want to travel, to see different cultures. If you want to stage and learn actual techniques, I tell most of our young cooks, stay in America. There's no language barrier. You can be in front of chefs. You can articulate the things that you want to say to them, and for you to grab as much knowledge as possible. But I always say that going to France, even Italy, Spain, Germany, working at 3-star Michelin restaurants, I wasn't nervous at all because there's a common food language. I don't need to speak German to understand who's an hour behind in the kitchen. You can just see it on their face, who needs the most help. Or you see somebody picking fava beans, I know how to pick fava beans. I can just belly up and just pick them as fast as I possibly can. So there's a common food language within kitchens that breaks down that language barrier. And going to Emilia-Romagna and going to Pasta Laboratorio, where there's pasta machines are all over Italy. The metal hand-cranked machines, they're all over Italy. They don't exist in the old walls of Bologna, and everything's rolled out by a giant mozzarella. It's a massive rolling pin, and it's like watching an artistic show as they roll it out. It's something completely different. And it was the first time I was so incredibly nervous in a kitchen, because it was old ladies that have been doing it for 40, 50 years of their life. They go there to gossip every single day. They don't even think about the emotions that they go through. And that craft, that one single craft, to put it under a microscope was terrifying to me. I was shaking, as the first time that they let me pick up one of the rolling pins. And it was just so specific and so specific to that culture that, I was enthralled with the entire process.
Can you explain for everybody this idea of the Pasta Laboratorio?
Pasta Laboratorio sounds like it's Google robots coming in and napping pods, and
they probably have a laboratorio somewhere here, a pasta lab.
But it's a bunch of wooden tables, and it's it's essentially just a bunch of wooden tables, and it's something that they produce. So a salumeria is something that is based off of historic shops in Bologna that sell cured meats, and they sell pasta by the pound. Some will specialize in a little bit more cheese. Some may do like sandwiches from it, but essentially it's cured meats and it's pasta that they sell by the pound. Every single one of those salumerias has a pasta laboratorio that's associated with, that's producing literally 200 kilos of fresh pasta a single day. And it's just 12. The one that I worked at, Bruno e Franco, was just 12 old ladies working around various wooden tables, and every single thing is rolled out by hand, which means that it's created over a 4-foot rolling pin, and they roll out a sheet of pasta that's 3 feet by 4 feet. And they do it in about 15 minutes per sheet. And it's just something that, also why I've always connected with Italian food is that it's so based off of culture. The nuance of what goes on from a rolling pin to a wooden table, it's two porous natures. It's a really porous, it's not like flat metal. And so there's it goes down to the science of how that pasta behaves and how it's treated with the sauce and why that's so important to them. But that's not the main reason why they do it. They do it based off of what their grandmother did, what their great-grandmother did, and it's based off of tradition. Some you could ask of why do you roll it out with a pin? You'd get this really, really archaic, you just don't ask. We roll it out by pins, And then some answers would talk about the nuances of the wood, and it was just that, it's a very special place, that you don't see a lot.
It is interesting. I spoke to the chef Massimo Bottura from this 3 Michelin star hyper modernist restaurant in Modena, and they use roto-vaps and all sorts of crazy contraptions when it comes to making the tagliatelle. They will only do it on a wooden table with a wooden rolling pin because for whatever grandmotherly reasons, plus the real reasons that you're talking about.
Right.
It does matter, and you can't improve upon this thing that seems very rustic.
Very, very shortly on, I had to calm all my American-esque questions to them. It was well, how come you guys don't stay an hour longer and roll out, another 25 kilos, and you'd make this money, and then, you can buy this machine, and why don't you have an automated dryer for the pasta? And they just weren't interested in it. I was I'm going home to cook to feed my family. It was that food culture, or even a culture, is so directly connected with food. That's why I thought traveling was so important. It's not just training yourself for a chef or working on your knife skills or learning out how to roll something by a rolling pin. Culture is so interrelated with food. It's the common denominator of every single person in this room is that we all have to eat. We all don't have fancy cafeterias that make this amazing food on a daily basis, but we're constantly, whether you aren't that interested in food, you're talking about food on a weekly basis, and that may be where to eat tomorrow night, or
Do you feel like it's difficult to translate that kind of spirit of, Italian eating culture to the San Francisco restaurant culture?
Well, it's great with the reason why when we were first approached to write the book, it was we want to do a flour and water cookbook, and it never really made sense to me. And I was well, such a young restaurant, and I just didn't like the scarcity of it. And when we finally decided to do pasta, it made so much sense to me because I think there's a mystery behind pasta. There's a mystery behind pasta because not a lot of people replicate it. We may have all in this room been in a backyard and thrown a steak on a grill, and we're a little bit more comfortable with that, and we've produced that before. There's a mystery behind pasta, and people, especially in San Francisco, love rustic Italian restaurants. It's because it's not something that they make every single day. It's not a part of that daily culture to okay, let's get the rolling pin and start rolling out. I think that you certainly see a resurge of people putting more time in, to creating their meals throughout a day. But, I think it's based off of something good, and that's post-war. How do we have the family work? How do we can items? How do we can something and have it available all across America? And that American mentality of making it faster, faster, and faster. And I think it's kind of reached a point where people are slowly kind of stepping back and saying, is this a food culture that we're proud of? Not to say there's something wrong with it. It's based off of something good, It's just going home and cooking for 2 hours with a family is engraved in them there, and it's something that they don't necessarily question that. And sure, you can get a really fast panini and a cappuccino on the street, but that daily exercise of cooking, and I think that, it's interesting to see it maybe slightly evolve in America.
And like you said, there is no real shortage of that rustic Italian restaurant in San Francisco. People go nuts for pasta.
Yeah.
And I want to hear sort of why, Flour and Water stands out. But you also mentioned that originally, the Davids had kind of a different vision for what Flour and Water was going to be.
Right.
And it evolved into something kind of what it is now. Can you talk about what it is now and how it became that?
What it's now, I don't even know what it is now. The train has gone off the tracks. But the original vision, first, like when I would buy 2 hours worth of phone calls or phone cards in Italy and just sit in a phone booth and talk to them about the business plan and how we were developing the business plan. And they wanted incredibly rustic Italian food. It was your antipasti, was a bowl of marinated beets, and that's it. It's just marinated and it's rustic. It's sitting in a bowl, and a pizza is a huge focus of the restaurant. When we first opened up, everyone thought we were a pizzeria, and we were selling 1 billion pizzas every single night. And we sold probably 4 times in the first week. We sold 4 times the amount of pizzas nightly than we do now. Because pasta's taken such a forefront to the menu. It was, my approach was, why can't we have a seemingly rustic atmosphere and nature of a restaurant and still have refinement on the food, on the plate? And it's something that I think so many restaurants strive for, and a lot of it you can't really explain. It's like, how can you have a pizza whizzing by your head, and it's cramped and it's crowded, it's uncomfortable to wait for a table, and then have something that's put on the plate that maybe you could swap out at a Michelin star restaurant. And I got increasingly not annoyed, but increasingly, I want to feel as normal as possible. I want to feel as comfortable as possible. And if I have to put on a suit that I wear once a year and I sit down at a formal table and I feel like I have to whisper the whole time, and someone comes over and you're like, "What? I'm sorry," why can't we have this incredibly rustic nature of an atmosphere and then still have refinement on a plate? Michelin-starred restaurant in New York City that serves a burger. That burger is so incredibly rustic. I mean, it's not made very differently than most burgers, but it's that attention to detail. It's like, I want that burger perfectly cooked. I want that bun perfectly toasted. That blue cheese should always melt a certain way on top of it. That attention to detail. I think having a rustic restaurant doesn't mean that you have to lose that attention to detail in every single thing. Like how clean the floor is in the kitchen, and having a kitchen that, can run like a Michelin-starred restaurant, I think affects the food,
I wanted to go back.
I didn't even think I answered that.
It doesn't even matter. I don't even know what I asked. No,
we're back.
Just kidding.
We're back. We're coming back.
We did a great job.
Yeah.
I want to go back to those formative experiences you were having in Bologna, and you talk about it in the book, kind of going beyond just the trattorias on the street and just the tourist places and finding these experiences that are under the table.
Sure.
And I wonder if that's something that your average person can go to Italy and find, or if being a chef, being a cook, doing stages opens those doors for you.
Yeah, certainly. I was so fortunate when I rented an apartment in Bologna. I didn't realize that I was renting an apartment from someone that does culinary tours. And it wasn't like him on a big bus. It was him taking around people in his car and bringing them to the prosciutto factories, to where they make Parmesan, and seeing them firsthand. And certainly in southern Italy, there's in different dialects, there's a really rude way or a comment to somebody is, "You're the type of person that eats at a restaurant." And that's like a slang for you have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to food. And so much of the amazing experiences that I had were at people's table. And then also understanding that culture. When it comes to pasta, I've been at tables where, someone started grating a truffle on top of a pasta and half the table is in an uproar. And they're like, "What the hell are you doing? That doesn't belong on the pasta." And for me, it's keep shaving, dude. just keep shaving, more truffle. That culture and how it interplays with that dining atmosphere is so important to them. It's like being in San Francisco and seeing people, I'll see tourists that are walking through there, and it's like, how did they get to this neighborhood? This is terrible. Like, not saying like in a not cool neighborhood. They're going to Fisherman's Wharf and they're like, whoa, I have this chowder bowl and this is San Francisco food. This is crazy. I think it's just that I love understanding what goes into, a city. I would never want to travel to a city again that didn't have that insider viewpoint. I think that's so important. And I think I was really fortunate enough to find that in a foreign country.
It's funny to me, given how much Americans and San Franciscans specifically love Italian food and how much influence Italian food has had on California cooking, how many things get crazily mistranslated when they're brought here. And I think that things like from Emilia-Romagna and Bologna, like tortellini, for example,
right.
feels like one of the most tortured things in the
world.
Yeah. What is that supposed to look like? What is tortellini about?
I mean, like tortellini and brodo is like the pinnacle of Bologna or Emilia-Romagna food. It's like it's used as a standard, of whether it's subpar or traditional. And I think that you can't take it. We keep going back to culture, but you can't take a trattoria in the middle of Italy and place it in San Francisco and it be a success. You can't take Flour and Water and put it in the middle of Rome and think that it's going to be a success, because there's different, maybe Italian and American food is easier to compare, but think of like textures of certain Asian cultures and some of those dishes not really relating to an American palate. I think it's the same thing with any sort of food culture, and it kind of gets adapted, and maybe it starts as a good thing, adapting it to a different culture, but like balsamic vinegar is one of the most protected processes in Italy. You can't have extra vecchio, a 25-year-old balsamic has to be jar or has to be put into a bottle that's specific to where that bottle and that glass is blown. It's a very, very specific shape, and then it has to get a seal of approval, and then it's extra vecchio balsamic vinegar, traditionale. It's so protected. You go in the supermarket here and you get a gallon of caramel. It's literally like caramel that has acid introduced to it. Middle America that's been only seen that big thing of balsamic vinegar, do they really understand the culture of balsamic vinegar? And it kind of gets bastardized, and I think that's too. It's like more, bigger, more.
You'd worked in Italian restaurants before you made this kind of seminal trip to Bologna, and then you kind of talk about when you're in Bologna, just that really opening your eyes to how pasta is supposed to be eaten.
Sure.
How did your view of cooking it and eating it change?
I just think it's like going to that source is so enlightening. It's we for the cookbook we bugged the hell out of Harold McGee. If anybody knows on food and cooking, we would just keep buying him lunch at Saloon Maria. I'm like, come on, we'll buy you lunch, and like entice him out. We just basically interview him the entire time for the cookbook. And On Food and Cooking was written a year after I was born, and it's still the most stolen cookbook from our test kitchen because it has so much relevance today. It was like one of the first food scientists to really put food forward, and it's understanding how it behaves and just being incredibly inquisitive about just such a specific item, and it's just pasta, and how does it behave and how does it eat, and what are the traditional sauces that it's accompanied with. Like there's something that's protected with that pasta that's like truffles don't belong on there, and I love that how that forces somewhat of a different creative nature. It's like stick to the tradition, and we say that the food at Flour and Water is regional Italian food without turning our backs on California ingredients, and you're not going to see that many avocados over there. And I didn't go to Bologna and be like, well, they use avocados here too. This is great. Let's bring it back to Flour and Water. But it was that Italian sensibility, what grows around you, treating it simply, and so much of that has to do with how pasta is treated there, how it's behaved. And then from a restaurant setting, it's like, well, how are they slightly drying it? How do they store it?
How does that sort of creative process at Flour and Water work? Does everything begin with the traditional reference? Is every shape pre-existing?
So we buy our food from small farms. That's like the tagline that everyone uses now. It's small farms and whole animals, and we don't really think of a dish and then order in food. We just order the best possible food we can, and we say, okay, well, what do I want to do with that lamb? And today it's lamb shoulders, tomorrow it's lamb belly, the next day it's lamb leg, and that feeds the creative nature to the menu. As far as the pasta program goes, like we want to adhere, like we don't want it to be too much of a blasphemy about that pasta. Tortellini and brodo. In my opinion, it's tortellini and brodo. It should be served in brodo. So it shouldn't be picked up in like a cheesy Alfredo sauce. It's tortellini and brodo. It's meant to be in a brodo. Well, we're in California and we have 12 extra cases of tomatoes that a farmer gave to us, and they're really beautiful. We can make tomato water and serve that tortellini in a broth, but that broth we made of tomato water, and we can serve it as like a lightened dish inside of summertime. So it's still sticking to that tradition, saying, well, it's brodo, but what do we have around us right now? Let's create this broth out of tomato. And I think that we try to adhere to it, but then we always put that little California twist on the end of it,
Do you ever get like hardliner Italian people in there who are just like, this is not...
Italian people are the worst people to cook for in the world. Whether they're Italian American or whether they're straight off the boat, because they want to tell you how their mother did it. And it's like, oh, this is good, but my mother used to, yeah, certainly. And I think that the biggest compliment that we get, and it seems like we get all the time, is when Italian comes in, they order something that is seemingly not traditionally Italian, and the response is like, this is so Italian. And it may be that avocado salad, but that sensibility of what goes into it is that Italian sensibility, and like that to me is the ultimate compliment. It's not like my mother used to put a little bit more nutmeg in the broth, and but yeah, it's a huge compliment to hear that.
One of the things I really love about this book is just how in depth you go with these things that we've probably heard lots of fresh pasta dough recipes, but it's 4 pages of pretty small type,
right?
Describing. And I also really like the thinking that goes into arriving at these methods. You talk about kind of your experience in the laboratorio and the women kind of only wanting to rest their dough for 18 to 24 hours,
right.
But like 30 minutes is enough here. Or one of my favorite things is this idea that I had never even read about in a cookbook of kind of absorption versus adsorption.
Right.
Actually, will you just explain that a little bit?
That was a Harold McGee lunch where we were like, well, what goes on here? I think that to back it up, like the book pasta, I'll open a pasta cookbook and it's just written word, and I have no idea what it's saying. I'm like, what? It's so complicated. It's like, right lateral triangle into, and you have to do math to figure out how to create this shape. It was so important to us that, like, let's get as geeky as we possibly can about this subject, but make it as PC friendly as possible, as friendly in nature of someone that knows pasta and wants to learn something about it, to we've just used flour and eggs for the first time. And how do we dive into the subject and still engage people? And it was written word, and we found that like photos were so important to us, because you can have this completely elaborate, thought out paragraph, and then you turn the page and it's like, okay, it's so much, because I'm such a visual person. But it's like that single subject and diving in as much as possible. We created a dough room to create all these pastas and breads, and then we created a test kitchen for the cookbook. And we really this is permanent. Like you can do little edits. Maybe we make it to a second printing, but it's permanent. It's out there. And that was terrifying to me, because I really wanted to make sure all the recipes actually worked. And then anything we said, that we're held accountable to it. And there's cookbooks that I read that's like, oh man, it's so like that's just wrong. It's crazy that went through all the edits. And one of the things that I was teaching all the cooks is, I do say I was like culinarily abused as a child in South Jersey. And, you know, my mother used to boil spaghetti, you know, take the lid off of the Prego can and heat up the sauce and then put the spaghetti in a bowl and then just pour the sauce on top of it. And forever, you know, I was teaching, we cook all of our pastas 80% of the way in the pasta water and then 20% of the way in the sauce. It was always so important to me. And I was always teaching these cooks, like, there's two things that happen. It's where the pasta itself is weeping a little bit of the starch into the sauce itself. It's helping to stabilize the sauce and concentrate the sauce. And then also too, the pasta is absorbing all of this flavor. So it's heavily salted water, it's absorbing that salted water. You put it in the sauce, it's absorbing all of the flavors of that amazing like whey braised pork shoulder.
And this is super common.
Common knowledge is what I was taught, and I said that to Harold, and he starts like laughing. He's like, "You're wrong. You are just wrong. You know." And I was saying that it was absorbing all of that flavor. Well, starch is water soluble, so starch in that pasta and that wheat-based product can only absorb water. It can't absorb any fats. You can't like rehydrate. You can't cook pasta in a fat and then have it hydrate, right? Absorb it all. Everything that's romanticized and amazing about that braise is mostly like essential oils, you know, that come off of the herbs, you know, all these things, the fat that's rendered off from the product. What it is that the pasta is only absorbing water. It's literally, you have all this braise and it's literally just hydrating itself with just water. If you cook spaghetti in red wine and you look at that spaghetti, it's really, there's only a red wine ring around it, right? It's only pulling out all of the H2O from the braise itself. Adsorption with a D is a term that he taught me, that it's how products adhere to the outside of that noodle. So that mozzarella makes an amazing texture on the outside of that noodle because you're rolling it from that wooden rolling pin on the wooden board. Its porous nature is putting all these little crevices, these little nooks and crannies around all of that pasta that you can barely even see by the eye. And that's giving adsorption the upper hand because it's able to link more things on the outside of this noodle. So the concept of finishing it in the pan was right. The fact of absorption and absorption was completely wrong. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just love how the entire story is in this book of something that we all, you know, if you're a cook or if you read cookbooks, like, it's just, that's something you think, like, oh, it absorbs the sauce.
No,
that's what
totally,
happens. Yeah. And then you kind of explode that theory, but still give the reason why it truly is good to finish your pasta in the sauce. The other thing, among the other things I like about this book is that you answer a question which I'm sure you get all the time, which is, what's your favorite pasta?
Is that in there?
It's in there somewhere. Which was the bigoli. Can you tell us a little bit about that dish?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really talk about Italian food, and you certainly can't talk about like pastas without talking about how regional Italy actually is. Northern Italian food and Southern Italian food are two completely different things, and that goes from not only, you know, each region to region, but also town to town. And my favorite pasta in the world is called bigoli, and bigoli comes from a hand-cranked machine called a torchio. It's made of brass, has a brass die. It's very similar to spaghetti, but it's hand cranked and it goes through this brass die and it puts this like incredible texture on the outside of the dough. The dough itself is made with like semolina, has butter, cream, eggs in it. It's incredibly enriched. It's almost like an enriched udon noodle, right? But when it comes out of this machine, it looks like a dreadlock almost. It's got this crazy pulls and textures to it. It's I love the texture of that noodle, and it has so much about how that kind of grips with the sauce. But the last time, like right before I wrote this book, I was in Italy and I was in Rome trying to go to all these restaurant supply stores because my friend wanted a torchio to bring back with him. It's that hand-cranked machine. And I was going around being like, you know, do you guys have torchio? And every single response was like, what, is that American? What is that? Like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, it's from the Veneto. It's from the from Venice up north. And it's like, no, it's from the Veneto. It's a hand-cranked machine. And then every single response was like, dude, you're in Rome. Like, no, we don't have that here. And it was just incredibly enlightening about how that plays on with those regions. And, you know, it just doesn't exist down there, you know. Torchio is unimportant to them.
I sort of implied that I would know when time was coming to an end, but I have no idea what time it is whatsoever.
More questions, from the audience.
Yeah, I have more
Yeah.
questions, but if you guys have questions, does anybody want to?
I live a block away from
Oh,
Flower
cool.
and Water, so I feel like I'm
Awesome.
like your neighbor. And
thanks.
I was,
Say hello sometime, will you?
yeah, I know, seriously. We eat there pretty regularly, and I wanted to hear about the neighborhood, and like because you guys have been playing a huge role in the neighborhood, especially now like expanding to Slu Maria and Central Kitchen.
Right.
It feels like kind of like gourmet alleys going on, and I wanted to know, I don't know, what's your vision for it and like kind of how it's evolved. I mean, I imagine I've heard a lot of stories about '09, and I mean, you guys were kind of putting yourself in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And now you've kind of created a spot in San Francisco.
Sure, it's a great question. In '09, obviously, it was not the best economical times. You hear of 12 restaurants a month now opening, and that's crazy. And there wasn't a lot of restaurants opening at the time, and we were really lucky, how we went about it. And that neighborhood, I liken to, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it's like Brooklyn. All of a sudden, like, people start finding out about it, and it was kind of on the outskirts. It had big warehouses. Rent was cheap. There wasn't a lot of people moving out of there, but there wasn't a lot of people moving out there because it was not the nicest neighborhood in the world. We have an amazing picture of Flower and Water before we broke ground on construction, and it was abandoned for 10 years. And it was this old El Salvadorian restaurant. People still come in to the restaurant, and they're like, oh, 6 years ago we went to the best rave of our life inside of this building, and it's taking a chance. It was gambling on that neighborhood, and it's this it's amazing juxtaposition of amazing old Victorian homes and then industry of businesses that are throughout that neighborhood. And we just thought it was a great mix. And fortunately, everything on 20th Street is actually the same landlord. So we started with Flower and Water. We always wanted a Slu Maria. We always wanted somewhere to like sell our cured meats, to sell the products that we're proud of, the salts, the olive oils. And so Slu Maria sits at the corner of an old German sausage factory. And so it really just started with that tiny little 500 square foot. And then there was a more building behind it. And we're like, oh, well, what can we do here? And then there was a little bar space, that wasn't a bar yet. It was like, well, what can we do here? And then sight glass moving in. And we actually took over the whole building and then helped divide up the leases. Because we didn't want we didn't want a Burger King. And Burger King would never move in there, but we didn't want a Burger King moving into this spot, And so we kind of helped orchestrate that whole building, which was really big at the time. There's not that many more plans. We're opening Café du Nord in Upper Market. So Café du Nord is an old, it's in the Swedish American Hall. It opened in 1907. Café du Nord, since 1907, has continued to operate as a bar, even through Prohibition. It's got these weird, crazy things about it. And so we're partnering, again, with the Bon Vivants from Trick Dog to, fun, underground, lively bar. And then we're opening another restaurant above that called Ache, which is a Spanish restaurant that we just made. Our longtime chef de cuisine, Ryan Powell, now a partner in the restaurant group, to help him open his own restaurant. And so besides that, nothing. We're doing a above the whole roof of, it's going to be a crazy year. The above Trick Dog, the bar, is a 4,000 square foot roof. And we just got done retrofitting that whole roof to have a 4,000 square foot garden.
You have some influence over that. Everything there is like very high quality.
Yeah. Well, we didn't buy the building.
Sorry.
Yeah, we took over the master lease and then orchestrated it. From there.
That, right?
Yeah.
So,
it was just important to us. It's like that collaborative nature of how we run the business, how the cooks come up with the menu with me. It's like, well, what do you want to work with today? You want to work with this, and that collaborative nature is very much that neighborhood as well. It's just getting good people to do what they're good at. Sight Glass is just good people that do good at what they do. I think that was really, really important to us. I live above Flower and Water. I live literally above the restaurant.
So we are neighbors.
We are neighbors. We'll say that. Yeah. Come over for a beer. Yeah. I couldn't imagine having these restaurants on like other parts of the city. Like, it's crazy. Like, I'm terrified of du Nord because it's a 10-minute drive away. And it's amazing to be able to be on that street and just kind of hop around. It's like I don't even have a home anymore. I just hop around from restaurant to restaurant and putting out fires,
Hi, could you talk more about the staging process and how
like maybe amateurs or regular people would go about doing that if that's an
Uh-huh.
option? Because I imagine it's probably selective for certain restaurants. Or
It's, certain restaurants are really, really strict about it. The higher end restaurants, the higher that you go, sometimes they're more and more strict about it. If you're going to stage, you have to sign a piece of paper and you have to stage for at least 30 days because they put so much time and effort into having you there that they want it to be beneficial for both the restaurant and yourself. It's like, find the restaurant that you want to stage at and just bug the hell out of the chef. That's it. Write him a bunch of emails, the more
Make sure you tell them Thomas told you to do that, though. I'm sure they'll really appreciate that.
Like, I've never met that guy. The more novice you are, it depends on the restaurant. If the restaurant's kitchen is like this little shoebox, it might be very, very difficult to take you on because it takes time. And when you're there, it's like the two-way street. I love it. We have an open door policy, and it's great because when someone's asking somebody a question, it's forcing them to like retrain themselves, So if you're on garde manger with a cook and you're like, well, why do you do that? The cook's like, well, why do we do that? Why don't we just put it there, But it depends on the space. The smaller the space, the more difficult, and every single restaurant's different. Sometimes they'll just be like, you have to stand in that corner, and you're literally not allowed to leave the corner, and it just depends on the restaurant.
so what's flour and water called?
Just email the chef and just bug the hell out of him. Yeah. I'm terrible at email. I'm really bad. It depends. We have a ton of stages, and then if you just contact the restaurant, just info@flour and water, and then it fits in with the time. If it fits in with the timeline, meaning that there's not a ton of stages there, or depending on what's going on, if there's a ton of events, if it fits the timing, and then open door policy for one day, and then beyond that one day, it depends how you do it.
Becomes a closed door policy.
I mean, but don't be offended if it is. But it's it just depends on that individual. There's certain people that come to the restaurant group with zero experience, and they're amazing. They're awesome. They just have a good attitude, and they're like they want to be taught what to do, and they want to get in there. They have no problem just jumping in, and they're amazing. There's people that come to the restaurant with 20 years of experience. And they're just a jerk, and they don't really fit in, So it depends. Every single person is completely different,
So I studied in Florence in college, and my host grandma there would make this just plain marinara. It was the best thing in the world,
Right.
and she would often joke. She gave me the recipe, and I've made it like every summer since, and it never tastes as good. So I think part of it might be just nostalgia, but she often joked that it's the soil in Italy, and it's the very specific types of tomatoes that you're using and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so I was curious, are there any dishes or any flavors that you've struggled to recreate in San Francisco that you tasted or enjoyed in Bologna?
Terroir is a real thing. It's not just about growing grapes. You can take the same grape, vine, you can grow it in 3 different locations, and it's the same grape. It comes from the same vine, and it's 3 completely different glasses of wine when you're all done of it. That's true with anything. We use San Marzano tomatoes. We use incredibly local ingredients. Our pigs come from 45 minutes above the restaurant. That is because of the terroir that is those pigs. Could we buy, this crazy egg-corn-fed pork from Spain, and it's the marbling's ridiculous. That's not our pork here. I'd much rather use our local ingredients, and just adds a nuance or a flavor nuance to each dish that you can't really explain. And it's the same thing with any food. The San Marzano tomatoes, you can grow the same variety in California, but they're San Marzano style, because those San Marzanos in Italy have to come from a very volcanic, enriched soil, and so there's truth to every product. That's why I fell in love with San Francisco and California the first time, because when I first moved out here, it was like, well, shit, this is what sage tastes like, or that's like the most amazing turnip I've ever had in my life. Like, that's crazy, and it was just sage, and it was just a turnip, So, most of our pork comes from Devil's Gulch. It's in Acacia. It's awesome for us. It's a 45-minute drive. We can go feed him apples, and he'll be on the menu like in the next couple of weeks. It's like amazing to see that kind of full circle. And then also, like, he now, because we have such a relationship with him, he grows pigs for us. He grows pigs, quails, lambs for us, and we have control over it. Like, we can, from size to weight to, what they feed the actual pigs, like the apples and stuff like that. And so it's cool. It's like, that to me is like a responsibility of a chef in Northern California. Like, it's going beyond, it's like just sourcing, because we're capable of sourcing amazing ingredients, it should be a part of the job description,
When's the last time you've had dried store-bought pasta? And go ahead. You can answer.
No. Go.
The second one is, in the restaurant, do you use SF tap water when you're making pasta, and the types, maybe talk a little bit about the flours you use?
Sure. The dried store-bought pasta is not a bad thing. We focus more on like Northern Italian regions, certainly with pasta. When it becomes summertime and we start growing the things that are grown in Southern Italy, tomatoes, chilies, peppers, our menu takes more of a Southern Italian influence in the summertime. But when you think of fresh pasta, pappardelle, garganelli, tagliatelle, all those things, that fresh pasta is from a region in Northern Italy. Every single thing that you see in the supermarket is Southern Italian pasta. So spaghetti, bucatini, rigatoni, all those things are Southern Italian pastas. Just because it's dried doesn't mean it's bad. There's some amazing companies that are in America that have dried pastas. We have an extruder. All that comes from an extruder. It means it's pushing out through a die. It's a mechanism. And we extrude fresh. So instead of having dried spaghetti, we make spaghetti every single day, and it's fresh. It's like pliable. It has a completely different texture. So dried pasta isn't a bad thing. It's just specifically from Southern Italy, and that's how it's bought and sold there as well. But no, there's some good brands of dried pasta. Oh, the water. The argument with water is that it is more bread making. So there's zero yeast inside of pasta. Anything that's like yeast related, so like bagels is a big argument. There's not a single good bagel in San Francisco. And then how water, the nutrients or lack of nutrients in that water and how it behaves with yeast. And so, yeah, we use San Francisco tap water for everything. And our bread's different. We make all the bread at the restaurant too, and it's different than if we were making it on the East Coast, But like I said, it's like, there's people that fly in. There's people that fly in water, to certain parts of the world, to make that New York style bagel. Yeah, it's just kind of crazy to me. I love a good bagel, from the East Coast.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thanks for having us.
You're going to sit around and sign some books, or you have to go do a thing? Hey,
we're going to sign some books, yeah. Well, thanks, guys.